Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. Ever since Florida State got snubbed by the College Football Playoff Committee, there have been lots of rumors swirling around the internet about the future of the ACC and how schools may be anxious to get away from the ACC, get out now in order to protect themselves from an eventual collapse, assuming that this is only going to further push schools like Florida State and Clemson to try to get out of the grant of rights as soon as possible. It also kind of suggests the ACC's status within the Power Five, the Power Conference hierarchy. And this has only been further enhanced by then the next day, the NCAA coming out with a proposal for creating a new subdivision of the college football bowl subdivision. So there is a lot of craziness going around about potential realignment and what could happen. And obviously, it all impacts the Big 12. So before we jump into this, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We talk a lot, if you can't tell, college football realignment. We talk Big 12, we talk BYU. Please give us a follow. It helps a ton. So now let's take a look at some of the major tweets that have been put out there. All right, so many of the rumors that I was referring to earlier come from this account on Twitter. If you follow anything college football, I'm sure you've come across him in the past. I think you pronounce it MH version 3. Anyway, this guy has had some mixed results. I kind of take everything he puts out there with a grain of salt. I don't think he's out there deliberately trying to mislead people, or maybe he is, but I think he puts out what he hears. And so I think nonetheless, whether it's true, whether people are feeding him lines, for a certain agenda or not, I still think it's all pretty interesting. And if we take a look at it, starting at this, it happened a few days ago. And I got to say, I know that I'm a little bit late on this, but with the holidays and it was my wife's birthday, so a lot of things delayed me getting this out, but I'm kind of glad I did because he's continued to post new things since then. So let's take a look at everything. So this first one, he says he doesn't have specifics, but he's told the ACC schools have been reaching out to your mark. Basically, what had happened is, the ACC getting snubbed to the playoff was kind of essentially a tipping point that they felt like, okay, they really got to start exploring their options. And then it says ACC schools that have contacted the Big 12 in the past 20 hours were Virginia Tech, Pitt, Syracuse, NC State, Georgia Tech, Miami, Louisville, BC, and Wake Forest. It says there's a lot of fear and a lot of smoke. So who knows? Again, the fact that he's admitting that there's smoke, can't really take everything at face value. But nonetheless, if any of this is true, or schools are reaching out, or maybe it's about other things, whatever, very interesting that these schools feel like that potentially Big 12 could be a better option for them. So taking a look at it, these are the schools that are reaching out. Obviously, not all of these schools would be ideal. I mean, Wake and Boston College, I think would get strong consideration from the Big 12. Miami, I think, is definitely at the top of that list. But then you look at it, Pitt and Louisville bringing in some, even Virginia Tech for that matter, bringing in some regional rivalries with existing schools would be fantastic. And then Louisville obviously brings a very solid basketball as well as football, and all three of those programs really do. NC State, not as much of an existing rivalry, but gets you into a great market and very solid. Syracuse brings the basketball, which we know Yormark likes in New York, albeit upstate New York. So, Georgia Tech obviously is interesting. Yes, the academics, but mostly because of the markets in Atlanta. So it certainly can't overlook them. And I forgot to mention Miami giving UCF a travel partner. But even without UCF in the mix, you would take Miami in a heartbeat if they become available to the Big 12. So now let's go back to these tweets here from MH version 3, if I get that right. So this next bit, let's click on this whole thread here. He says 16 Big 12 schools, so talking about the new Big 12 with the four corners and omitting Texas and OU. Briefing in the afternoon discussed current events, landscape, along with bowl invitations. ACC implosion was discussed. Several scenarios were explored, the most intriguing being a merger of sorts with the ACC. So if this is true, the Big 12 is thinking, what happens if the ACC does implode? And, who would they go after? But it says a multi-year process of merging with an FSU, Clemson, UNC, and UVA-less ACC with the Big 12 could culminate at the next round of TV negotiations. So those four, no surprise to anybody, aren't really in the mix here for going to the Big 12, but it sounds like everybody else is, including Notre Dame as a member in other sports, which is very interesting. This would be not one conference, but two separate, but they're negotiating. They're sharing revenue and negotiating collectively with TV and nearly exclusively scheduled games between the two conferences. And then members would be shuffled around between the two conferences for geographical reasons. And so very interesting. So I want to take a look at this. So now we're saying the whole ACC, including Notre Dame for all other sports, would be considered. And if they're going to divide this, it would make sense. Basically the Mississippi. So you're taking these schools here as well as these ones. And I think it's a little, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 as well. And then I think you've got to have 16 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah. So that seems like it would be the most logical divide between the two. And I know that West Virginia at Cincy would be glad and ecstatic to finally be in with the ACC, even though it would be in that format. So very interesting that they wouldn't do a complete merger, but some sort of alliance, for lack of a better word, which I know that gets thrown around and made fun of, but essentially that's what it is. And then it says one final nugget, that briefing and merger scenario, the possibility of adding Oregon State and Washington State along with the PAC assets to have three entities. So you'd have PAC, a Big 12, and an ACC with Notre Dame negotiating TV under one umbrella, sharing revenues and scheduling. So there is the possibility of not only this scenario, but then also this one with the two remaining PAC schools. And I don't know how you divide that. Again, you could take kind of this 8 PAC, or maybe even make it a 10, and then you have this here. But then is everybody else going to stay in this really big ACC? Who knows? There's obviously a lot to figure out. But the fact that all these options are potentially on the table is very interesting. It's funny to go through all this to essentially end up with 3 other conferences that were pretty close to already existing anyway. So very weird roundabout way to get to more regional conferences by growing, becoming less regional, and then working together, rearranging and reestablishing these conferences. Just wild times we live in. And then, I like this tidbit. A collective of 3 autonomous conference gets 3 guaranteed playoff spots. We hopefully, I don't know if, these conferences can guarantee that, but, with all the shift going on, but you'd think as it stands right now, because they are 3 separate conferences and they all already basically have their spots guaranteed. PAC obviously is questionable. Then yeah, that makes sense. Also says the autonomous conferences may be coming sooner than you think. Yormark and Phillips meeting this week to discuss the landscape and how their 2 conferences can help each other. So we might not have to wait real long for some of these changes. But what I think is interesting about all this is that these conferences are trying to work together to avoid getting left behind. That's why the ACC schools, if there's any truth to all this, are freaking out. It's because they got left behind. The Big 12 knows it easily could have been them. If Georgia had won, it would have been Texas that would have been out. And yes, the playoff is changing next year, but Big 12, I think, is honest and understands where it falls in this pecking order. And then we saw what just happened to the Pac. So we know that these conferences are trying to survive, and doing something like this is a way that I think these conferences are trying to solidify things and make sure that they don't get left behind by the Big Ten and the SEC. But the problem is, I almost think they're making it easier in light of the news that came out from the NCAA with creating a new subdivision within what it already is the football bowl subdivision, so a subdivision. You almost make it easier. We talk about the haves and the have-nots. The problem is there's plenty of have-nots in both the Big Ten and the SEC, but then if you have a group of the other three conferences all together, yeah, you can't completely ignore them because there's some big brands in there, including Notre Dame for other sports, but they're not enough to. I think it'll be too easy to say, okay, well, you've created your own sub tier. We've got the SEC, we've got the Big Ten here at the top, and now you guys all admitted you guys aren't us. You're joining together. You've already got this other tier, and so I think that by doing this, it kind of draws that line in the sand that says, yeah, you got the big boys, and then there's us, and then there's the group of five. And so I almost think it could have an inverse impact on what they're trying to do. Conversely, I don't know how they don't look at doing something like this for fear of getting really left behind. So it might guarantee that, these differences when we talk about, the SEC and the Big Ten looking at a potential a farm system with the NFL, essentially. Now, again, I don't know if there's any truth to that or if there's any way that could happen. It seems like that might take a lot of work to make something like that happen. But again, there's a lot of money there that, see, there it was, this tweet. The NFL teams in the farm school would get paid according to current wage standards in place with existing drafts. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on now that who knows what could happen with all this. But my whole point is this whole potential alliance, for lack of a better word, sounds great in theory. I love the idea of the Big 12 being proactive, as it has been in this last several rounds of realignment. Go out there, make itself stronger, work with the ACC or raid the ACC, whatever it does. But again, I almost think that, by trying to hold on to its place in the college football tier system, in the pecking order, that almost solidifies it, says, yeah, we're number 3, which is why we have to do this, and we're kind of the catch-all for everybody else. So it'll be very interesting to see if there is any truth to this stuff, or and if it is true, what actually ends up coming of it. All right, so now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments, what do you make of all these rumors? Do you put any stock into it? And would you like to see something like this take place? Would you like to see the Big 12 and the ACC come up with some sort of merger, not really merger, but agreement? Or would you rather see the Big 12 just go in and poach a few select schools from the ACC? How would you like to see all this play out, and what do you think will be best? Where do you think all of this is headed? Because I'm worried about it, but please let me know in the comments. I want to know what everyone else is thinking about it. And then be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Go Cougs!